Oh, good afternoon and welcome to the special meeting of the Glendale Water and Power Commission on February 6, 2014. May we have roll call, please?
Commissioner Camargo?
Here.
Commissioner Chan?
Here.
President Yao?
Present.
Commissioner Jimian? Commissioner Hale?
Here.
Okay, next item, please.
2. Consent items. A. Approval of the January 14, 2014 special meeting minutes.
Any edits or comments about that? I just have a few. So see on item 4A, water rates update, the first paragraph. I think the cost of service analysis instead of cost of service analyst, so we can just make that correction there.
Okay.
And also on 4B, electric reliability report on the first paragraph. I think towards the end of the end of the first sentence, including industry-owned utilities. I think that's supposed to be investor-owned utilities. So make that change from industry to investor. And then the last item I have here is on 4C, which is Nodaro Drive West Side Stream report. On the second paragraph, I would like to include the number of homes that was mentioned for that report. I think 25 homes were impacted. Am I correct? Was that 25?
Yes, 25 homes.
Okay, so if we can add, let's say, towards the second paragraph of 4C, the second sentence, it says GWP sent 2 letters, October 21st, 2013 and November 1st, 2013, notifying, if you can include 25 residents, so that we can have the record of the number of residents that are impacted by this.
Okay.
Okay, because I think that was mentioned during the report last time.
I've got one note on item D. The first bullet point in the list of recommendations should actually read include a fit adder that would reduce the super peak, not reduce the super peak to include a fit adder.
Okay, anything else?
Is there a motion to approve then the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, so let's consider those minutes approved. As
All those in
amended.
favor?
Oh, we have to do that?
Well, since you're amending them, formally, yes.
Okay, all right. All in favor of amending the minutes? Aye?
Aye.
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 Abstain, because I was not here.
So Commissioner Chan will abstain for that. So just for clarification, Ms. Cadenas, I mean, for minutes that are updated or clerical, grammatical errors, do we still need a motion for that?
Typically, when it's a simple motion and there's no discussion, you can just entertain any comments, and hearing none, the minutes can stand approved. But where here we've got some clarifications to the minutes, in some cases somewhat substantive, it's a good idea and good practice to just do the formal motion, even though it takes a little extra time.
Okay, no problem. My understanding was that if we can just make some grammatical error or correction for clarification, then that will be sufficient. But that's fine too. Okay, next item, please.
3. GWP Commission/staff comments.
Any comments from staff or commissioners that are not on the agenda? No announcements to be made? Okay. Okay, if not, then let's move on to the next item.
4. Reports, information. A.
Before we start, I think we have a change of agenda items. I'm going to move up to 4D to move up to be first, so that we have the presenter that needs to a flight to catch. So please, Mr. Zern, your introduction.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the Commission, Amy Curran is making her way up. Podium. She is going to go over the results of the survey. You may recall back in December, I believe it was, the RKS came in and went over the results of the most recent survey we had done, and we had indicated we were going to go back out for another survey. That has been completed. The results are in, and Amy is prepared to provide you the results.
Yeah. Good evening. Nice to be here again. think it was actually November when we presented the 2012
It's all a
results.
blur to me.
So it was decided then that we would jump back in the field and get an update. So today we're going to go over what the project goals and methodology were. We're going to look at comparisons of 2012 to 2013 numbers, as well as compared to statewide numbers, and then we'll wrap up with a summary and suggested next steps. So the goal of the project was really to measure and monitor GWP's residential customers on their satisfaction and compare those numbers to statewide results. But of course, we had specific objectives to look at 2012 versus 2013, and we also did some deep dives in things like communication effectiveness as well as from the source. The methodology was conducted online and on the phone, where we had 100 phone completes and 142 online. The survey was conducted in December, 4 months ago. The survey length was about 12 minutes, and of course, GWP was announced as the sponsor of the research. If you remember, when we delivered in November, the 2012 was based on 200 phone completes. So just so you know that this time we went in with phone and online. I mentioned that we're going to be comparing results to statewide. Those results were conducted over the phone across 600 residents across the state. Those results were done back in July 2012. Now, we do the survey statewide on the even years, so we are getting ready to go in the field for 2014, and we'll have updated numbers there on the statewide. Satisfaction. We went ahead, we're going to be focused on 2012 versus 2013, but we wanted to show you 2011 as well, because satisfaction has dropped just slightly, even though that is not considered a statistically significant drop. You can see it's also at statewide levels. We went ahead and we asked an open-ended question, say, what could we do in order to improve satisfaction? By far, people stated lower bills. They also wanted to see a better website, as well as customer service, and more better explanations on changes. Now, these were open-ended comments, so if anybody would like to see all of the verbatims, we have a couple hundred for you to go through. But we went ahead and quantified it just to see what was coming on top of mind for folks. Now, the big decline this time around was overall trust. So you can see when we presented the last time, you had somewhat of an increase in trust, but this has dropped significantly here in 2013, and it is quite below statewide levels. However, reliability of power has held strong and consistent and is at the same as statewide. People reporting that they had an outage in the past 12 months has also decreased from 58% to 46%, and this is about the same level that we see statewide. Customers are very satisfied with restoring that power, the effort in order to restore that power. So we saw quite a bit of an increase in 10 points above the rest of the communities across the state, which is great. So the two problem areas here are price satisfaction and the value of power and water. Price satisfaction, again, I wanted you to see that 3-year trend of going down way below statewide. We had a big drop from 2011 to 2012 on the value that they have of their services, but that has held about the same since we reported back in 2012. So I just want to talk a little bit about price satisfaction. Not all customers are convinced that GWP is doing all their efforts that they can in order to control costs. And in fact, 37% believe that GWP is working very hard. And that means on a 0 to 10 scales, only 37% of the customers are giving 8, 9s, and 10s that GWP is working very hard to do this. So you can see the majority of the customers don't think that there's much effort there. And when it comes to the value, we asked, compared to the other services like your cable TV, your telephone, and internet, how does the value of GWP services compare to those? 60% said same or worse. So when we know power and water is really important in our lives, probably more important than television. So I wanted to point that was an interesting finding. But again, we added another open-ended comment, and these are things that you could look at the customers' individual comments and say, well, we found that 36%, again, lowered the cost is what they were asking for. And this is not a predefined list. It was just asked, and that was what came to the top of their mind, what they said. Well, when it comes to contacting customer service, we can see that no contact was at the same rate. However, customers calling in has reduced 25% to 19%. But you can see those coming to visit the office and those who have written a letter or emailed, probably more likely they're emailing, has increased. So we're kind of shifting from calling to emailing, is what you can see in the data. It's visit versus written in email. So the overall satisfaction with the contact with GWP is great. It improved from 66% to 72%. We can see one call resolution and the call length is at the same rate. Effective communications, unchanged since 2012. Clear, easy to understand, covers subjects that interest me is also the same. Rating GWP on communicating with the digitally inclined, so people who prefer email, we ask, how do you rate GWP on what kind of job they're doing? And we can see those who say excellent, there was a slight uptick from 22% to 27%, but still there's a large group of them saying, I'm just not sure what's going on. And we asked, how can GWP improve these communications aimed at customers like this? And really, 16% said, I don't know, don't know, there's no need to improve. But then we had a group of people, 9%, top of mind say, I want you to send me alerts via email, text message, some sort of electronic format. And then another group said, I just don't want you to communicate with me. We also looked at their interest in GWP developing a mobile app. And you can see here that it's kind of divided, a third, where a third of the customers are very interested, another third is saying, I'm somewhat interested. So you can see quite a chunk of people are saying, I'm interested, but then you have another nearly 40% saying, I'm just not interested in an app. And this app was going to notify them of outages as well as monitor their use and bill pay. That out for. Now we jump to from the source. We can see that the familiarity with this has increased from 53% to 63%. And among those who are aware, I'm sorry, I got to think about how this goes. I'm sorry. We asked, then are you aware that this is only available online? Only about a third of the people said that they are aware of that. Same rate as we saw in 2012. So how would you like to receive from the source? We can see that regular mail has declined quite a bit, where email is about the same, but then we have this big jump of, it doesn't matter. Mail it to me, email it to me. We've got about a quarter of the customers now saying it doesn't matter. The majority of customers believe that they have registered their email with the site, so from 42% up to 72%. It's quite a few people who believe they have registered with GWP. Among those who are not aware that you have to register your email to get from the source, 62% said they are unaware of this. So we're talking a lot about digital, and I just wanted to show you, this is really interesting, that people say they own a smartphone. It has increased 20% every year since 2011, and you can see the majority of your customers do own a smartphone. And their preference for GWP to communicate with them has dropped U.S. mail and increased with email. So we're definitely seeing that switch, but you've got these customers who are still kind of divided between traditional methods versus digital, so it makes the communication challenge difficult because you're going to have to create two, not just one. When it comes to social media, it's still really low when it comes to wanting to stay connected via Facebook or Twitter. That was unchanged. So really the summary here is that satisfaction dropped slightly, but not significantly. There are two troublesome areas. Trust. We saw that huge decline in trust. Also price and value. But we think collectively with GWP that it's likely that the trust has declined because of the recent rate increases and the fact that there's diminishing communications on this. There were some good highlights there. That's noteworthy. The power delivery continues to be rated well. Customer service gets really high marks, and communication effectiveness showed a little bit of improvement. Really, next steps is about building that trust and making sure that GWP has the capability and the resources in order to communicate to their customers effectively. Were there any questions?
I have a question. Thank you very much for this presentation. It's very informative. With the trust issue, I see that you indicated it's likely result of recent rate increases. How did you come to that? Were there questions that were asked specifically relating to rates?
It wasn't directly asked in the survey, but just saying what has been going on in the residents' environment just that could possibly be. That was just one of the hypotheses.
And customers responded to that and agreed that that was one of the issues?
No. We did not ask that directly.
Oh, okay.
That was just looking at taking what's going on in their environment and saying what could it possibly be driving this trust down. It wasn't asked in the survey, but it was just us looking at what's going on in the environment.
Okay. And there was a diminished communication? How do you explain that part?
Sure. Let me back up.
It was slightly increased, I thought, on communication.
Yeah, let me look here. Oh, that's the digital. Oh, sorry, no, it's actually stayed the same. So 57% to 55% is the same. Yeah, there's not a statistical.
Okay, so there was not a decrease in...
Sorry, I have a,
Okay.
yeah, I have a typo.
And another question I have is for Mr. Learn. Is there a group in the company that's looking at this closely and looking at like what questions were asked specifically and what areas we can improve and how we can do so to improve ratings?
Yes,
Next year?
Commissioner Chan, me. I can tell you long before this survey was done, I would have been the first to tell you that I realized the trust was waning. It's not just the rates, it has to do with where the utility went, management of the utility, the financial situation of the utility, and then to hit the residents with a water rate increase, followed by electric rate increase, followed by what will be another water rate restructuring and possible increase. I think those are directly related to that. I think you're aware that we've made substantial reductions in the utility with regards to cost, but folks, that's not going to settle with folks as long as you keep raising the rates. So I started probably going on a year ago what I call an image rebuilding campaign for the utility, to not only rebuild our image in the community, but amongst other utilities, and to regain that trust. But I think until we get outside of this rate restructuring and get all the rates in place, come back and take care of the water situation that we're in, we're going to continue to have people who have some doubt. You saw, there in an open-ended question, in both satisfaction and improvement, it was 45% related to rates in one and 36% related to rates in the other, and there was nothing even close as far as second. Here you had 8% about getting greener, which we certainly want to do, but you just see they're 3s and 4%. It's about the cost to the customer combined with what has happened in the utility over the last few years. So we've got a big chore ahead of us to reverse that. But absolutely, we collectively as management are the group that's looking at this on an ongoing basis.
Rates are going to increase. I mean, and that's going to be the same for all other utilities.
Right.
So that's a common issue. Now, but if there are other areas that we can improve, and if that's like increasing our communication efforts, more meetings, or just more programs, different programs that the customers are requesting, things like that, I'm saying maybe we can focus on.
And those are already in the works. I think we're already beyond where we had been before. And, aggressively using social media along with our local cable access channel, every other medium we can in the city to get whatever message it is that we want to get out there, we're using that. And targeting different categories, different segments of the community, whether it's multilingual, whether it's how do you cater to the younger crowd versus maybe a more senior crowd that isn't as involved in social media. So all those things that we're looking at. But you're absolutely right. This is going to be a barrage.
Okay.
You're going to see GWP more than probably you ever wanted to, but we're going to get our name out there and let people know. Because you see, one of the critical things that people recognize is the reliability. That's what we're about. And that takes a huge effort and a great investment, a wise investment. And we have that. We just need to translate that into everyday, what people think about us on a daily basis in GWP, and that's what we're working on. No question, you're You're absolutely right, and we're going to keep pushing that and pushing it hard.
Thank you.
I apologize. I do want to back up. The increases in communications that was done on the last slide was among digital customers. There was an increase from 2 to 27% that GWP is doing this excellent.
Digital.
I went back up too far on my deck.
Mr. Carmichael, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so just to follow up to Commissioner Chan's question and Mr. Zern, to your comments. So I hear you saying in some respects that part of this needs to kind of work its way through because we've gone through some rate increases already, and probably a relatively safe assumption that those increases have had an impact on trust. But it seems to me, so I would love to be able to see a plan and a target. So a target with respect to if we are uncomfortable with the level of trust now, do we have a minimum trust level that we would like to aspire to, so that as we implement the activities that you're talking about, we have sort of a target or a bogey that we're aiming for? That would be sort of the first piece. And then the second piece would be, as we do the type of outreach that you're talking about, thinking through what actually we say to consumers, because it seems to me that we have an opportunity to think about what are the types of things that we're going to include in our messaging, and what are the things really that customers can control on their own. So if part of the dissatisfaction is the amount of the bill, perhaps the one thing that consumers can control is the amount of electricity, the amount of water that they consume. That is one variable that they can help manage on their own. So getting back to the plan, moving forward, just like to hear your thoughts on, the prospect of establishing goals, targets for some of these categories, so we know what we're aiming for come next survey, and then a little bit more interest in, or an interest in hearing more about what the plans might be and things like, conservation.
I have a recommendation on number one. The targets that you talk about, we do have the statewide numbers. So take, for example, the trust number. Oops, right there it was. Statewide, I think that's a good target there, and we can actually break it out to just Southern California. Maybe that's a better target, so we could work with the team to decide, do we want to look at just Southern California? Do we want to make it statewide? And then sometimes we also recommend who's the gold star and say, look, who has this highest score? So we would have one that's achievable, like the statewide number, and then the gold star, which utility gets the highest scores, and have that as a benchmark. That's just an idea.
And that's exactly the comment. I think for us right now, RKS works for CMUA, California Municipal Utilities Association. They do these surveys for them on an annual basis, I believe. Mm-hmm. And so using those state benchmarks as a goal, I think, is at least where we're at right now, very effective. To that end, I've asked staff to contact some of Amy referred to as gold stars to find out some of the things that they're doing where they get the satisfaction. In many cases, they're not raising their rates, and so that's helpful. But in many other cases, for instance, with SMUD, they have a very aggressive outreach program and constant communication that people seem to respond very well to. So nothing is a surprise or nothing. Everything is talked about and talked about on a constant basis. So those are some things that we're doing. Is not necessarily reinventing the wheel, but where there's been successes in other utilities, we're certainly not shy to emulate those in order to improve where we're at. So yeah, I think the state goals are something to shoot for. I'd like to see us there. Doesn't mean that's where we stop. I'd like to be, personally, we want to be the gold star that other people are calling to ask what it is that we're doing. And so, but we're going to have to get there. It's going to take us a little bit to get there. We won't make that jump in 1 year or 2 years, but we need to incrementally begin to bang away at that. And so I think using those statewide averages as a goal, getting there, and then moving on from that point, I think is good. As far as the second question, we absolutely will tie in our modernization efforts. And you're seeing now with the utility, as we have gotten past the large part and the expensive part of our modernization effort, but the part that folks really there's nothing really tangible for them to experience from that, except for that new meter that we put at their house. So we've installed the meters, and we've installed multiple numbers of software programs to run it and make it effective, and we've got the billing system in place. So that's kind of the first thing, although I'm not so sure people will be like really happy about that when we say we got the new billing system and it makes it really efficient for us to bill you, so aren't you happy? But I think where the next phase we go to is where people are really going to see the benefits, and that is the packages that allow you to monitor in real time your electric usage. Tuesday night, Council approved a software package for us to put in for our water, to do the same thing for water, so that you can monitor that. These are really excellent programs. They tie well into our AMI system, our automated system. There's hard copy and digital. We're going to next week expand our SIVA, which is our screen, the frame screen that we have. We're going to expand that pilot program. We've had 72 residents on board now. It's been very successful. We'll get that. That's another tool for people to use to manage their own usage, so they can become more involved in what it is that they're doing and using, and help them save and conserve. So I think all those combined, and the outreach program will obviously pull the modernization efforts in and get people more active in that as well. But it's just, I think we're in a little bit of a tough period, and we know that, and we'll pull out of this and we'll be better for it, but we've got to go through a little bit of a rough spot first. And I think people are just a little cautious. And, one of the things in Glendale, and we talked about this with you during the electric rate discussions, is, our rate strategy has probably not been the best. At least I don't think it's been the best. Where you implement rates and they go long periods with no increases and then suddenly come back with very large increases. It seems to be, at least for most of the muni utilities that are about our size, is to have this consistent increase based on cost for that year. And those increases then come in at 1 and 2 and maybe 3%. Manageable things that you can attribute directly to something like a mandate or a state mandatory requirement that came into effect, or cost of living increases, or for us, some of the things that occur with our benefits and retirement packages. At the same time, we show where we've made cost reductions and cost cuts in our operation, or efficiencies that we've implemented to help as well. But we got to get there first. So, like I said, we've got a couple challenges left for us to get through, and then I think once we get there, at the same time, we're not waiting. I'm not waiting to get all the rates done. We're going out on this barrage of outreach and letting people know these are some of the things that we do in GWP. You may not know that, because I think right now we're known as the folks who raise the bills, and that's not what we want to be known. And you're right, Ms. Chan. Raising rates and having rate increases is inevitable. We'll have to do that as we continue to run this utility, to keep the very expensive and intricate infrastructure up, and probably more than anything else is to keep pace with state mandates and laws and regulations that are going to come down. I mean, as Mr. Linz was saying the other day, the utility industry has changed more in the last 10 years than it had probably in the previous 90. Considering all of the legislation and requirements that we're under. And those don't look like they're going to end. They look like they're going to keep going. And then you have things like droughts and those type of things that all impact you. So we've got some work to do. That's already well underway, and we will continue to forge ahead and push hard on that. Because like I said, I want to be able to come back at some time, not in the very distant future, and say, guess what? We're at the gold star level. We're right there. We're one of the utilities people are trying to emulate. They're calling us, asking us what it is we're doing. So that's where we want to be.
Great. So I guess I would just advocate for perhaps a follow-up presentation at some point to more directly address some of the things that you're talking about, and perhaps to revisit some of the things that I've suggested. I mean, what I'd love to be able to see is, let's establish a goal. However you want to establish that goal, you can also look at the gold stars as you suggest. But if we're going to let's establish a hard goal for where we want to be, and then the action plan for getting there. And as you say, Mr. Zern, that, maybe that's a 2-year plan, maybe it's a 3-year plan. But I'd just like to see a plan on how we're going to get from here to there, and some of the elements of the plan, right? So, because right now on the summary and next steps, we say rebuilding trust, and we got a lot more sort of color around that from your comments. So thank you for that. but would just appreciate more of a detailed plan. If we're concerned, certainly I have a concern about the drop in trust. There are some reasonable thoughts on perhaps why those numbers have moved. So let's establish a target. Let's develop a plan in order to fill the gap between where we are now and the target. So I just made a note for the agenda forecast. Perhaps we can look at it when we get to that point in the agenda.
And I think it's important, we'll go through, but there are a number of regular reports we give you that's incorporated into already, and we'll just point that out and highlight it as we go through. But we'll make sure that we keep you posted on what our progress is and where we're going, what our goals and objectives are.
Yeah, I wonder if you have any sort of crosstabs, particularly on the trust question, about different customer classes and maybe where there are higher rates of dissatisfaction or higher rates of satisfaction than others.
And you said specifically to trust, like kind of a profile?
Well, across the board, but specifically to the trust questions, because that would help staff sort of target their outreach to particular customer classes that might have greater levels of dissatisfaction than others. If maybe our businesses are a little bit more upset than the multifamily or single-family residences or something like that.
I have actually something a little bit better than just demographics. I don't have the slides with me, but we did do a deep dive into customers, what they feel their relationship is with GWP, and we find that people who feel informed are high across the board. They give overall satisfaction in the 9s. Then there's the group that say, I rarely hear from GWP except for when I get my bill. And for some folks, that's okay. They're content with that. I want the same amount of communications. But then there's a group of people that say, I want more. I only hear from you when I get my bill, but I want more. And I think they're about 20% of all customers, but they really do hold the scores down. They give like 5s and 6s across the board.
That's a great question, because that's actually based on the last survey results that were presented to you in November. When we went back, I said, that particular question, I would like us to drill down. Why? What is it that, I mean, because it's a general response, but what makes you feel that way? So we got a little bit further into the weeds, because you're absolutely right. That helps us then is, you don't trust us. Why? Because you don't like the suits I wear? Well, that's one thing. Or is it because of this or this or this? And so, yeah.
Yeah, feeling informed has a great impact.
Great.
And if just have additional comments. Thank you for a great presentation, by the way. So the demographic question was my follow-up as well. I noticed that you have a sample representation of the different zip codes that you asked.
Yeah.
And it sounds like there were some people who were responding with higher bills than the people who have lower bills. So it sounds like it might be counterintuitive to lowering the bills, because the people who do have low bills, who may be impacted by the most, pretty much have a lower sampling than the people who do have higher bills. So that's just a correlation, but it doesn't seem to be...
Let me walk you through the slide,
Yes,
because
please.
I'm so glad you asked. This was the one topic that came up at the last presentation that we didn't have a slide prepared for you. So I had this at the end, hoping it would come up. So what we did is we looked at all the variables that were available in the customer base. And zip code and the transaction amount were the two that we're going to work the best, because we want geographic representation. We also, you had mentioned low income versus high income. So by having that transaction amount got us there. So, and typically I have to say this is like at a very detailed level, and it made our job a little harder, because typically we look at neighborhoods. So we would, like for LA, we collapsed it only into 4 geographic regions, and here we've got many zip codes. So this is what the total customer base looked like. And then we pulled a random sample, because that was one of the topics that came up the last time, that maybe random isn't that great. Well, I can here to show you that it is near perfect. So we pulled a random sample for those who had a phone number, 5,000 of them. We also pulled an online sample of 5,000. And you can see that they're nearly spot on with what the total customer base is. There is no statistical significance here. I tested everything at 95% confidence. Then we looked at, okay, how did they come back? Our actual survey completes. And you can see the only place where there was a statistical difference were the online completes and the 91202 area code. We have a little bit of more representation there than we would want. And then also a slightly more on those greater than $325 on their transaction amount. So we can see that pulling sample at random works perfectly, and then we can see just a couple of areas on the online completes that we have a little bit more representation that we would like. But if you actually, when we report in total, you put the phone and the online together, it washes everything out. So it worked great. I was really excited about this.
No, it's great sampling, and thank you for making that update, because that was one of the concerns of mine, was to make sure we have a good representation of our customer base. But the second question I had was, as I look at your comparison to statewide survey versus Glendale Water and Power survey, the timing is a little off. I mean, the conducted survey for statewide is in the summer, and we're conducting a survey in December. So based on just the timing of the year, there could be some behavioral changes. I mean, people could be very stressed out during December with the holidays and the families get together. So I'm not sure, maybe that spills over to GWP as well. So can you elaborate on potential differences in timing of the surveys?
Yeah, I can't exactly, because I can't test it to know, but when it comes to pure methodological statistical research, we would want things at the same time each year. You're right, but when we were here at the time, we wanted to get that update as quickly as possible instead of waiting until July this year. So it would have taken me an additional about 8 months to get here to you. So,
But in the past, my experience with surveys, customer satisfaction results, is that surveys are conducted over the calendar year, maybe quarterly, so that you get that incremental representation and maybe more of a wash if it's not just one specific period of the year, so that you can have an overall, I guess, blanket assessment. So is there a plan to do that type of analysis where it could be quarterly, so that you can compile the results for the whole year rather than a snapshot of a particular month?
we certainly can do that. We can discuss that further and what works best for you.
I mean, cost would probably be an issue.
Absolutely, that's a cost, and I will tell you, in our discussions, I'm not so sure what the value added to that is, and I would have to rate that against the cost.
I mean, the only recommendation I
The
have is...
expenditure for something that is minimal in its value return to us is, in my opinion, not a good investment, and I wouldn't recommend that, but we'll look at it.
If
We'll
it's
talk with
costly,
Amy.
I would suggest keep it the same calendar period. I mean, if we're going to do a statewide assessment during the summer, then let's do the GDP pretty much during the same type of period, because if the issue is electric rates during the summer, there could be critical peak prices. We want to make sure that same assessment is comparative, is apples to apples comparison. That's always been my concern as well, because I went through this during the electric rate increase back in 2010 and 2011, and we see that may not be the overall issue. We have rate increase, like Commissioner Chan mentioned. It's going to be continuous, and it's a given that all electric utilities will be experiencing rate increases. So what is it that is different here? There could be it's on maybe not fully GDP's results, but because of the customers' behavioral changes or what their life experiences are, or what they're going through during that period when you ask them those questions, that could impact these results as well. So we just want to pinpoint down exactly what it is that GDP can have actionable impact on it. Because outreach events and additional proactive outreach to the community is great, but it might not necessarily impact these numbers unless we understand that if we survey them in the summer, it could be differently, whereas we can change our outreach tactics because of different timing of the surveys.
Right.
I think we can do that. That isn't an issue. We'll just change the time we do it. But I can also tell you that based on some of these results, at least right now today, I don't think the time of the year was going to make much of a difference. I think, in fact, if we'd have done it in the summer, it might have exacerbated it, because that's when rates are typically higher. So we need to get over this initial hurdle. We've got some work to do. But I think that, to get it as much as a fair comparison as possible, we'll do it at... You do them both at the same time, Amy?
Yes.
Okay. We'll do it at the same time CMUA does theirs.
Great.
Coming up soon.
Any other questions or comments for Amy? Great. Well, thank you for your time. It's great information.
Great.
Well, looking forward to seeing you back. Okay, that's 4D. Let's get back up to the list. Next item, please, Gloria.
4A, CMUA Capital Day Report.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, Steve Lenz, Chief Assistant General Manager. And at our last meeting, we talked about our new Sacramento lobbyist, Emmanuel Jones, and getting them here either this meeting or next. And We had a discussion with them, and February is the deadline for all bills to be introduced, so they suggested it would be best if they came the first meeting in March. So they'll be here. They're confirmed for the first Monday in March to come down and talk to us about the landscape that should be a little bit more complete at that time with all of the bills that will be submitted throughout February. However, on Monday, Mr. Zern and Mr. Boeg and I spent the day in Sacramento at CMUA Capital Day. That's the California Municipal Utility Association. And their members are most of the public utilities in California. We spent the first half of the day with legislators and legislative staff talking about energy and water issues, and to no one's surprise, the concerns over the drought kind of eclipsed everything else. I would like to just speak quickly on some of the issues we heard from and who we heard from. First, we heard from Senator De Leon on Prop 39, and his concern was that we make sure that we work with the schools to get these solar projects at the schools implemented in an efficient manner, because it's not often that the voters actually approve some bond money for these types of projects. So he thought it was important that we work with the schools to build public trust around their vote of confidence on that bill. Second, we heard from Assemblymember Quirk on AB 32 and RPS, and he mentioned songs, and I think a lot of the folks up in Sacramento are thinking about things like demand response as a solution for RPS and greenhouse gas issues, or to shave the peak. And I think they're realizing that with songs down, the demand response is not a viable solution in itself. They also did agree with the public utility community that they should give us a goal and let us work with our communities to reach that goal. In other words, the ways and means of getting to those goals, instead of prescribing how we get there and which particular renewables that we use. Senator Jerry Hill was there supporting general CEQA reform. Senator Hannah Beth Jackson, who's from the Santa Barbara area, spoke a little bit on water issues and cap-and-trade carbon offsets. She stated an opinion on carbon offsets that's somewhat the opposite of the industry. She felt strongly that those offsets should come from California, and those of us in the industry are strongly support offsets from anywhere in the country, because sometimes it's cheaper to get offsets and plant trees in another part of the country, or to reduce carbon somewhere else. And as we've said, carbon is a global issue, and emissions are a global issue, and we're looking for a deeper, more liquid market. And the more offsets we have, prices come down, and they're more available for us. Cliff, I know I'm not going to get this name right. Cliff Reckschafen is staff from the governor's office, and he actually voiced the opposite opinion on offsets and agreed with the public utility industry that we should be looking at least nationwide for these offsets, and potentially globally. He also said that the governor was concerned about everybody getting the word out on the drought. He actually had gone to the CMUA site and wanted us to make a bigger splash about the drought, because he just didn't think we were getting the word out quickly enough. And then finally, we heard from John Laird, who's the Secretary of Natural Resources. He talked about the drought, and it seems every time we have a severe drought, desal comes up, desalination, and he basically said that, we're still looking at that, and it's not really commercially viable and ready for prime time yet, but it obviously comes up every time we hit severe drought. We spent the afternoon meeting with Glendale representatives, Senator Carol Liu, and staff for Mike Gatto, and we had a few primary points to get across. The first was that Glendale Water Power and the public power community has made great progress on RPS. The vast majority of us are right on track for meeting the 33% by 2020, and the message we tried to get across was, give us a chance to operate and settle into this before we get more, before we get the 50% RPS. And I think they understood that. The second of three messages was, please try to avoid retroactive law changes. Glendale wasn't directly affected, but there were some law changes that impacted gas contracts. And Glendale's blessed with a local biogas project and Shoal landfill gas project. But some of the other utilities had signed these long-term biogas contracts, and all of a sudden the legislature was saying, well, wait a minute, you can't use these for RPS. And so that got fixed. But we're just saying, hey, we have a very long-term planning horizon, so please be consistent so that we can plan accordingly. And then finally, a comment that I already alluded to was we said, look, each of our utilities and communities are unique. Give us a goal, give us 33% RPS, but please don't prescribe the means and methods of getting there. Give us an opportunity to work with our communities towards those goals, and we've been doing it. And I think most of them understood that. All in all, I think it was a very productive trip, and we built some relationships with stakeholders in our industry, and even had some conversations with staff for Mr. Gatto, who was going to help us with a particular issue that we thought we might have to talk to you about in terms of introducing legislation on biogas BTU standards, but it looks like we might get some help from staff to solve that problem through a Phase 2 proceeding at the PUC. So all in all, productive day. And as I mentioned, next meeting, first Monday in March, we'll have Emmanuel Jones here, and they will go over the landscape with us of what's going on in terms of both energy and water legislation at that time. So the next item is, are any questions on that before I go to KPIs?
Yes, I do. Before you move on to the KPI, yes, I'm very interested in of course, the RPS related and also the water drought issues. And I see 4C drought preparation that's coming up, so that's great. I do have a question on the first note that you made, solar in schools. You mentioned about Prop 39. I know we've made huge effort and progress, with the RPS, and so I'm just wondering what do we have a program in place working with schools at the current time?
We have a solar program, the solar incentives that totals about $3 million a year. That's split between residential and commercial.
Right, with schools, I'm talking about?
Schools are included in the bigger portion of that, but we have met with our schools recently, actually, to talk to them about Prop 39 implementation, and they are actually getting somewhere in the range of $4 million a year. This is Glendale schools, so they're already getting more from this Prop 39 than our entire solar incentive program. So
how can we as a utility assist, or how do you plan on supporting that?
Well, we've offered our assistance. So if it's accepted, and when it's accepted, we'll be happy to help them. But at this point, they've been forging ahead.
In terms of maybe
solar
expediting the process and
anything that we can do to help, that offer has been made. That was one of the issues when we sat down with them. In fact, then we had our staff go through and look at any other areas where we could help them with conservation, to help them with some of the recent rate increases, and if there was ways that we could help them identify other programs that might be available for the schools in addition to Prop 39 that they could utilize. So, and that's an ongoing relationship that Mr. Keenan, who's in the audience, and his staff maintain with the schools. So at any point that they're like our assistance, we're more than happy to help them.
Okay, thanks.
Well, as it relates to solar, I noticed that as you drive around Glendale, some of the schools have huge solar investments, like Glendale High, John Marshall, I think. So what part do we play in those installations that happen over the summer?
Not a real big one, because they are pursuing those on their own. I don't believe that they've used our staff as a resource for any advice. I think they're getting that through some consulting folks, and I don't know if you're aware, but the schools are not regulated by the city. So any kind of construction or building that goes on is not regulated by the city. They don't require city permits or city inspections. That's all done by the state architect. So unless they ask us for advice or they ask us for any assistance, and we're more than happy to provide that. Most of the installations, unless Craig has some different information, have been undertaken by them, their own staff, and their contractors.
Do we provide any incentives for them?
I don't believe we've provided any incentives.
Well, we do under our existing program.
But it's been,
they have access to that.
Okay.
But have we actually granted them some? Have they been successful in getting some of that? We'll have Mr. Keenan come up, who's our
Okay, just
Public
curious. if
benefit
it-
charge, and that's where it comes through, is the public benefit charge. Monies?
Craig Keenan, Business Transformation and Marketing Administrator. As far as the school's participation in our SB1 incentive program, I don't believe they've applied for any incentives under that program to date. They would be eligible had they done so, but no.
And we made that available, so, but
We do support them through our business account reps. We'll get them, contact with people in the city that they need to get their projects underway. If they want data as far as energy consumption data for doing analysis and that kind of thing, we'll do that for them too.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of weird that an institution like the schools wouldn't want to take full advantage of the incentives that the state and the city has available.
It's not that we haven't provided incentives to them for other projects. I know that one of the very first PVC programs we did was it was around $500,000 towards lighting and other things at local schools. We've done a number of things, and I know we keep track of every thing we've done with the schools as far as energy efficiency.
Right.
It's just not the solar.
some lighting and HVAC
Lighting,
upgrades.
pretty much every school in the city has participated in some way in our energy efficiency programs.
So with the solar installation in school, are they eligible for net metering as well? I mean, if they produce more energy than they need during the day, and then would they be eligible?
I would say yes, but I'd defer to the city attorney on, she knows the
Yes,
net
they
metering.
would. They'd be eligible.
So wouldn't they have to sign those things, and now the new fifth tariff to be eligible to make that declaration?
Oh, well, they have to sign an interconnection agreement.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we
Whether we-
know, and we do know exactly what's out there at what school, how big it is, estimate of how much it generates, and because we need to keep track of what's on our system. And we
So
do.
whether they pay for it exclusively or we help in some grant funding, they still have to connect with us.
Right. No, I understand that part. Just that schools are talking about being stressed out about budget issues, and these are like opportunities where they fail to utilize. I mean, that's unfortunate for them. But I don't want them to miss out on additional net energy metering that potentially could change by the end of this year, where they have to make the declaration if they do produce excess power that they need to declare, or else they lose it. So that's additional money that they could put back to the schools.
And they're aware of the program.
Okay, hopefully they are. Great, sounds like we're doing all we can to help the school, whether they accept it or not. I mean, it's something that they should be aware of, so keep up the good job and keep up that dialogue at least.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments about Capitol Day and lobbying? No?
Yeah, what are some of the nature of the CEQA reforms that are being contemplated in the legislature this year?
Well, the one big secret reform that was talked about was a potential exemption for purple pipe projects that are less than 8 miles, because they're really trying to, give folks incentive to get, recycled water out there. So that was the one specific issue that was mentioned. He's talking about general cleanup, though. Otherwise, he didn't get into detail.
Is there any nexus between all this conversation about carbon offsets and maybe the CEQA reform, so that we create, a exemption for carbon offsetting projects that might, encourage us to do things in California?
That's certainly a good idea, and at least a good discussion point, but I'm not sure they made that connection when we were there. But obviously, maybe something we'll talk next month when the lobbyists come down, because, as Steve said, so much focus was on water while we were there, and the drought, and the whole idea that what was being said is this emergency legislation is going to come into being, and it was being done on the fly. You've probably already seen hints of it. There's going to be huge amounts of money that we're going to be outlaid for shovel-ready projects to develop drought responses to drought conditions, whether that's increases in storage, purple pipe development, other conservation efforts and outreach. So we're actually waiting for that, because we're going to see if we can't take advantage of some of that as well. But that's an excellent point we should bring up when the lobbyists are down here next month, is to tie that in.
And I think in light of the water bond that's probably coming down the pike, we should probably have our sort of list of shovel-ready projects and maybe make some recommendations for council as to what GWP should endorse in its asks on the water bond.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we don't have a huge list of shovel-ready projects. We're kind of working our way through that. Having been I'm a veteran of the ARRA process and what exactly shovel-ready meant, I've talked to Mr. Boeg, and I think that we can come up with a pretty healthy list. And so I think it's all going to be done pretty quickly. It's going to be one of those things where they're going to say, you have X short period of time to get the projects in, get them approved, and let's get moving. But believe me, we'll be jumping in there as best we can.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Lentz. Next item then, I guess.
Okay, so
Wait, Gloria.
Into the record.
4B, KPI quarterly update.
Mr. President, members of the commission, once again, Steve Lenz, our KPI master is not here this evening, so I'm going to attempt to walk us through some of the highlights. You have a 4-page table of KPIs that we submit as part of the citywide key performance indicator project, and you should also have kind of a 1-page narrative related to those KPIs. And I'd like to walk through some of those. If you turn to page 3 of 4, first, KPIs 49 and 50 are key performance indicators related to my area, which is power supply. And you can see that our cost per kilowatt hour has gone up from 0.051 cents, or about half a cent per kilowatt hour, to about 0.6 of a cent per kilowatt hour over the past 2 quarters. And likewise, the total supply expense per kilowatt hour sold has gone up as well. And this is primarily due to rising natural gas prices, as well as purchases of renewable energy. And I think we see this upward trend continuing for the foreseeable future. There's been, at least for the last 2 weeks, there's been a very big spike in natural gas prices. Natural gas prices, my traders came in on, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday morning, saying that the market opened at $30 per MMBTU at SoCal Gas Citygate. It settled down. We ended up buying some gas on that day at $7. But until a couple weeks ago, we were down in the 4s on a regular basis. So, with that, and as we scale in more renewables, we just see this trend going up. And on these indicators, we don't have a great deal of control. It's mostly, seasonal and market and regulatory impacts that are driving those prices up. So, moving back to page 1.
But Mr. Lentz, let me interject in that.
Okay.
I thought your department hedges those natural gas prices so that the present day or current prices don't really impact the price of electricity as much, because we do hedge a lot of it.
Well, about 80% of our system is fixed through various, long-term projects and contracts, but you're never 100% hedged. So you're going to face some price, volatility in the front month, which is what we're experiencing now. So some of that will come through. Sometimes when we see this coming, we'll buy some physical chunks forward as well to try to lock in some of that pricing. But you're never 100% hedged going into any given day.
Oh yeah, no, that's a given. But the regular market prices don't really impact the long-term prices of electricity as much, because you do hedge, let's say, 80% of it.
Right, but the other 20% is subject to a big spike, and you're paying double the price you normally pay for gas. And that price is magnified in the power markets. So our markets were in the peak were in the 40s, off-peak was in the 30s, and, just yesterday it was more like 170 in the peak and 130 in the off-peak. So, those get magnified, and you're buying little pieces of the supply at those amounts, and so that will show up
but on the
in
flip
your
side,
costs.
But can you sell into the market once you already hedge some of the lower rates? Can you sell either electricity or natural gases when it goes up?
You can if you have more than you need, and if it's economic.
Right. So do you make those type of decisions so that it would benefit to the city as well? To
Yeah,
make
they
sure?
do. The traders make those decisions every day.
Okay. So not necessarily it's one way. When you mentioned that there's a spike in natural gas, that it sounds like everything is negatively impact our operation side because everything goes up because of it. But potentially there could be a flip side where it goes up, we make money too. So is that not a fair assessment that it's a both-way situation where it's not negative impacting GWP, but GWP can also benefit if prices do go up?
That's true, but on a magnitude basis, we're buying much more energy for our retail load than we are trading in the wholesale market. So while we might make some on wholesale, we're spending much, much more on retail. So generally, the market goes up dramatically, your retail costs are going to go up. Retail expenses on net are going to go up because you're not making all of that up in the wholesale market because you've got more volume on the retail side than the wholesale side.
And did CAISO make an announcement of some sort today regarding a shortage of natural gas?
That they put out today.
Flex Alert.
Flex Alert, and that, I think it's in effect till 10 p.m. And so that was based on adverse weather conditions back east, which is, they believe, causing a shortage of natural gas nationwide. So it's basically conservation, voluntary conservation efforts. And so we posted a linkage to that on our website although we're not in the CalISO system, nonetheless, at some point in time, we're not an island unto ourselves. If there's a shortage of gas, there's a shortage of gas. And so we just wanted to make folks aware of that through the alert that was given.
We expect to get a similar alert from L.A. I just hadn't heard of it before we showed up here today. So.
I'm sure they will. So we hadn't heard yet.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
So if you turn to page 1.
I have a question.
Okay.
In your section, looking at the bottom, the two lines, 62 and 63, there's actual versus budget O&M expense, and there's actual versus budget revenue. I am seeing different numbers, like for first and second quarter, and then the 13 and 14 actual, I'm seeing 72% and 81%. Can you explain to me, what are we saying here? Are we spending more than we budgeted, and then receiving more than what we expect for the revenue, or is it the other way around?
Well, I think this is cumulative. So I think when you look at 62 and you look at the second quarter, 43%, I think it's basically saying that, we've spent 43% of our budget, which should be close to 50%, 2 quarters into the year.
2 quarters. Okay, so you spent actually less than the 50%
Yes.
then. Okay.
And then we have here that the actual versus budget revenue is about what they're both close to that 50% mark, which is about what we would expect after 2 quarters.
Well, okay, wait a minute. But after 2 quarters, you have 72% for 13-14. That means you've spent more than 50%.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar.
You added the two together. That means we spent more than what we budgeted by 22%. Am I reading it right? Yes? No?
No, and this is one of those things where we put the KPI in and then try to divide it into a quarterly basis, because we usually go by an annual basis, so it's sometimes a little bit difficult. So, at this point in time, you're looking at, we're 56% of the budget. If you're looking from 61, 62, 72% of budget and 81% of budget.
And we've only had 2 quarters.
Or actual versus revenue.
Only had 2 quarters.
For 2 quarters.
So you're saying we spent 72% already just for 2 quarters?
That's of budget revenue.
Those
are collections.
Expenditures.
That's budget.
That's income, right?
Right, that's income.
Well, the last one is income.
Last one's income.
Right.
Then
But the one before
62
that is
versus
expense.
O&M expense.
Right.
And on the top, it's cash reserves compared to which is 56% cash reserves compared to what the policy
Okay,
is.
so for expense, we are over. Okay, we over-expensed by 22%.
I guess the question is our procurement lumpy? Are we going to see a drop-off in the third and fourth quarter?
We could. This is seasonal, so you may see that drop-off. Or, this is, again, you make a projection based on what you think the market's going to do. So if the market is performing at a higher level, we're going to be over budget. So we have to make those adjustments during the year. Our objective always is to stay within budget, but this is a little bit more volatile. There are things I can control a lot more easily than this. I can't control the market, and so we'll look at where we're at versus what costs are at a particular time. So our projection for what the market, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, we'll project at the beginning of the year of how the market's going to go based on past experience, but who knows how the market may really go that year. So at this point in time, although we could see a drop-off, we'll see. That's why I say a lot of times it's a little bit difficult cutting these things into quarterly because that's not normally how we evaluate on a monthly or an annual basis overall. But
Yeah, I'll have to talk to the finance group and get you some clarity on these numbers. I know that overall the budget, we are on track and under budget for the entire year on a bottom line basis.
cumulative for everything.
Yeah, so I'll have to talk to the finance group and get some clarity around why that's the 72 and the 81%. Because
Right.
even with those 2 quarters being mostly summer, I wouldn't expect them to be quite that high. So.
Right, exactly. Because
I'll take a
I
look
think
at
the
that
purpose of this is to track your expenditures and, the revenues. And I know we're going from quarter to quarter, and while, yes, there may be projects where, the expenditure may be a lot higher at the last quarter, but I think we all need to know that. We need to know what projects are going to come in later, and we need to understand why the numbers are like that. Because it's only been 2 quarters, and I'm seeing like 72% expenditure. I'm just wondering why. So, yeah, if you can come back and explain that, that'd be great. Thank you.
So on page 1 are some of the water key performance indicators. And first, number 14, we had our number of main breaks go up from last quarter, which was 3, to 6 this quarter for a total of 9. The good news related to that is KPI number 15, where the average time to repair those breaks has improved by a full 3.5 hours down to 2.17 hours instead of 5.6. We also have an increase in the amount of water produced from our local wells. That shows up at KPI number 9, pardon me, up to 0.79 billion gallons. And that also is the reason for the KPI at number 3, which is a reduction in purchases from the Metropolitan Water District, which is always good because Metropolitan Water District water is much more expensive than our locally produced well water. And I've got, we do have water staff here if you have specific questions on water KPIs.
And are we still having a goal of 60% from MWD and 40% from local production? Is that still the goal, or 70-30?
We're currently at 70-30. Yeah, we want to increase our local well production. 60-40 is a good goal. So we've got a lot of work to do there too, from a well development, well cleanup, well efficiency improvements to make. And we're probably even a little, just a touch up above 70-30 really right now. So, but yeah, that certainly is our goal overall, to increase our local production.
Yeah,
and you'll see again, here's a situation where you said, yeah, our purchase of MWD water has gone down. Well, that's a seasonal issue as well. So for 3 months of the summer versus, you get into the cooler part of the year. So see how this all works out at the end. I think we're still projecting probably an increase in overall purchase of water from last year.
Yeah, that's something that is not indicated here because, being on this commission for a while, that's the goal that we've been trying to look at. So where does it say that we want to go from 70 to 60, or that we're trying to get to that point?
It's not on this sheet.
Right.
No, that would be something more in a strategic plan that we would set forth.
Okay.
And so, and I'm saying 60-40, that sounds like a good goal. Maybe it's even more than that. We'll have to see. But that's one of the things Mr. Boyg's doing, is a full overview of our local well, what our water rights are, what our production capabilities are, what we need to do to make those wells more efficient. Do we need to drill more wells? As you know, it's not just a matter of drilling a well and producing the water. In most cases, we have to treat that water, so you have to put in the treatment costs of that. So those are things that he's doing, somewhat of a comprehensive well study. The objective of us to continue to increase our local production and at the same time decrease our purchase of met water.
Right.
I noticed like line 13 for new service turn-ons. It's a dramatic decrease from last year. So far, half a year, we only have 19. Last year was 93. Was that expected? Do you know the reason, and did we expect that?
There's really no goal for this. This is really dependent on the number of services that we apply. There are years, both electric and water, there are years that we have a lot of service connections requests. There are years there's a lot less. There's really no clear indication. We just
Less people moving around, less people moving in,
or some of these are big projects too. The difference between electric and water, the electric, we count the meters. In water, it looks the numbers are small, but we have one main that may have 200 customers on it, so the numbers are a little skewed based on that.
I think you're going to see an increase as some of the larger projects begin to come online.
Okay, so when those 200 customers apply, then the 200 will show up here, right?
No,
Or
there's
just
only one
No,
application.
Oh, just one
One
turn
meter
on.
for 200 customers.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's
Okay.
when we have
the
main meter.
In electric, everybody has to have a meter. Every
Right,
individual.
right.
In water,
Okay.
you can
Yes.
have a multimeter. So one particular 200 unit, a multifamily, has one meter serving it.
And what we, like Mr. Cern stated, we expect this number to increase because we have a number of applications that are currently in process.
Okay.
So just as a comparison, we have about 85,000 electric meters and about 34,000 water meters.
Mm-hmm.
So picking up on some of the earlier comments, and in some ways consistent with the conversation that we had about the customer service report and goals, I mean, I appreciate that in some of these categories, we may not have a goal, right? So in terms of the new customer activations, that's going to be consistent with whatever's happening in the real estate development area. But those areas where we do have targets, one of the things that I would really appreciate is to be able to see those targets listed on the key performance indicators. I appreciate your comment that we also have the strategic plan, which may guide some of our efforts. But if this, in fact, is a set of key performance indicators, would be nice to be able to use this for a tool. And then President Yao, one of the things that I recall you mentioned at a previous meeting is perhaps a color coding to simply really call your attention to those areas where certainly staff at least is concerned about our particular performance, or I should say our performance in a particular area, so that we would have not just raw numbers, but numbers versus a target, and then a way of sort of focusing our attention on those areas where it's needed.
Okay, we'll probably extract that data out and put it in some sort of a summary on the front. I think, as I explained to you, this is the format that's used by the City Council, so we just adopt the same format to show you. But so something different, we'll have to create probably a cover page that will point those out and make those comparisons, so you can see those right up front.
Right. I mean, it could be that the City Council might appreciate that as well, but certainly for at least my purposes on this commission, I'd appreciate it myself.
Okay.
I have another question before we move on. Page 2 of 3, line number 23. Total O&M expense per kilowatt hour sold. 12 and 13 was 14 cents. For the first 2 quarters of 13 and 14, they're 23 and 34 cents. So my question is, what happened there? Why did it increase so much? It's O&M.
I think Commissioner Chan is talking about the electric session now.
Right.
Were
Electric
you
section, yes.
experiencing water sessions?
I will tell you that my what I believe that is that as you were aware, we had to put our capital improvement program on hold. We had no capital improvement program, and so the costs of our staff would be charged to the capital program, and was charged 100% to the owner, which increases our overall owner expenses.
And that is correct. What we have now, what you would see is the difference when we go to third quarter. If you recall, we had our bond approved, and the bond just got funded back in December. So starting this quarter, we will be moving a lot of our staff time from O&M because they'll be working on capital projects. So that's going to shift around.
So you anticipate a much lower third quarter?
Yes.
Yes, third and fourth quarter would be more consistent when we had some capital funds that we're spending in the earlier years.
Okay.
But this was a critical area, and because we didn't have capital, I didn't see that as I did not want to reduce the staff knowing that the capital would come back. That just wasn't a prudent move. So we moved their expenses into O&M, did primarily maintenance work. That's all we did, is maintenance work. Now that we have capital money back, their salaries then charged to that as they do heavy construction projects, and you'll see this number go down.
Yeah, so we'll see a decrease in third
Yep.
and fourth probably.
And throughout the
rest of the
future.
year.
So I hope we never are in that situation again.
Okay, all right, thanks.
And some good news on that same page 2 of 4 on the electric side is you can see the number of preventable outages at KPI 28 were actually 0 in the quarter, and were 1 the quarter before, last year being 8. And I think we've spent, Ramon's group spent a lot more money and time on preventative maintenance, and they're spending some time on root cause analysis, and this is causing those numbers to go down. On line 29, you can see the percentage of overloaded transformers has gone down dramatically in the last quarter from 1.3% to 0.28%. And once again, that was a result of an effort to really focus on some of these areas that were overloaded and to reconfigure those so that the transformers weren't being overloaded nearly as much. You can see that went down from 1.3% to 0.28%. And then finally, at 34 and 35, some very good numbers on preventable accidents and preventable vehicle accidents at 0. And it's actually been 0 in both of those categories for the past 2 quarters, so very good news for safety. If you turn to the final highlight I'd like to comment on page 3 of 4, which is 61, and I think this is directional. We had a net increase of 21%, or $2.6 million in our cash reserves, bringing our total cash reserves up to $81,840,000. The council adopted target is still 124 at this time, but this is primarily due to the revenue enhancement and some of our business process enhancements. And so, with the rate plan in place, we're obviously going in the right direction, and we expect this to work its way back up towards a bit over that 100 million mark over the next few years. So that's all the highlights I have. If you have any specific questions, once again, we have technical staff here. We can try to get into some of these, or you can let us know what you might be interested in for next time in terms of more detail.
I think it's just what Commissioner Carmichael reaffirmed from our comments from previous meetings, was to set those goals and highlight, color code those areas where we're meeting goal in progress and maybe not meeting goal. So green, yellow, and red would be good.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, please.
4C, drought preparation / water conservation.
Mr. President, members of Commission, hello, my name is Atina Hartunian, and I'm the Public Benefits Coordinator here to discuss the water situation and give you an update on our water conservation efforts and programs. As you know, the Governor declared a drought on January 16th. With that declaration, all member agencies of the Metropolitan Water District met and aligned their messaging to encourage increased conservation through our communities. GWP issued a press release in response and in support of the Governor's declaration, asking all of our residents to conserve and to do more than what they have been doing. Since then, we have started our water conservation outreach through social media, our website, bill messaging, and we'll continue to ramp up our conservation messaging to all customers, including having materials in different languages and reaching out to businesses and residents through public service announcements, advertising, brochures, information, and various marketing materials. We are working closely with the Metropolitan Water District and with their messaging, and we'll begin meeting with our neighboring cities, including Pasadena, Burbank, La Cañada, Crescenta Valley, in order to align our messaging and share information on conservation and outreach. Residents at this time can find information on conservation programs, the water situation in California by visiting our website, glendalewaterandpower.com. As you can see, the programs have been placed on the screen. These are some of the programs we're currently offering, and I'll go through them, and some of the upcoming programs that we will be offering soon. Our newest program, which Steve mentioned, was approved by City Council on Tuesday, is our Water Smart program. This program is designed to send out water usage reports to all of our residential and multifamily property owners on their water use and what they can do to conserve. The paper reports will eventually be sent via email after the first year to customers, and then point them to the Water Smart web portal so that customers can obtain more information on their water use and conservation. And then as we launch the program in the next couple of months, it has been proven very effective because now customers have access to their water usage data and be able to view their usage daily. And in addition to that, we do offer appliance rebates on our website. We are continuing our landscape classes to educate customers on water smart gardening and ways that they can reduce their outside water usage. We also work with MWD on their SoCal Water Smart program and offer rebates on appliances, landscape items, and rain barrels. And we will soon launch a turf removal program. We are currently designing this program to include a landscape consultant that will work with our customers in order to meet and interpret the Glendale's landscape ordinance and help customers effectively remove their turf and replace it with California-friendly plants. The rebate will be $1 per square foot of turf removed. Yesterday, MWD launched 2 new business programs, which we are also a part of. One is the fitness center program incentives that offer rebates to customers or fitness customers on urinals and toilets. The next program is the public agency landscape program, which offers commercial rebates to businesses that change out their irrigation systems and make it more water efficient. We're also thinking of bringing back our water conservation 101 classes. These were very effective during our last mandatory water declaration. Helps customers conserve, teaches them indoor and outdoor water conservation measures. We give customers a free water saving kit and also give them information on water-wise landscaping. MWD has also started offering rebates on rain barrels, which our customers are also taking advantage of. We have that information, and today we met with a vendor to design rainwater harvesting classes, so we'll be implementing those in the near future as well. And lastly is the WaterWise gardening website that will help our customers research and learn about native plants, how to incorporate them in their landscape, and be able to showcase their home once planted to show other residents how to conserve and do the same. So that's the overall summary of our programs that we're offering. At this time, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yes, I do. Thank you so much for covering all that. So the programs and classes that are coming soon, they will be advertised on the website, yes. I assume? Okay. And then our homeowners can just go on there and sign up for the classes, right?
Yes.
So these are all voluntary programs. Has there been discussions on the mandatory programs yet?
We have our mandatory ordinance is ready and in place. We're not prepared to do that at this point in time, but we will keep a very close eye, and we're ready to move. One of the things is that during the past drought, and I think it became apparent to everybody, that conservation isn't something that just occurs during a drought predicament. In California, we need to be conserving at all times, all the time, no matter what. And so when we lifted, or when the council lifted the Phase 2 mandatory, we left in place the Phase 1. Water-wise, water-smart, voluntary measures that always are aiming at a 20% reduction. Those will always be in place in Glendale. We don't anticipate ever taking those off. So we rolled right into this, and as you know, MWD kind of sets the tone for most of the agencies, and they're comfortable with where they're at today. That could change very quickly, but today they're very comfortable. They have invested a tremendous amount of money in water storage capability since the last drought. They're very proud of that. The city of Glendale has also invested extensively in water storage capabilities, so we're very proud of that as well. So for the time being, we are doing okay with the voluntary measures, but we're ready to move into the next phase and to go mandatory if it's necessary. This is a very serious situation. We absolutely agree with the governor's move. We want to be cautious in how we proceed, not jump the gun, but at the same time be fully prepared to move into the next phase and the next phase and the next phase if necessary. Hopefully not, but if necessary, we're ready to do that. And I think we sent you all a copy of the conservation ordinance. Okay, I just want to make sure you had that. So
Even a follow-up to that question is, even though we're in a phase 1 voluntary conservation, we can still continue to do outreach, like 3 days a week watering, because I remember the phase 2 back then where we asked customers that you got to water, I don't know, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday or something, or the other way around. And if you don't, then you get reported and you could potentially face fines. But we can still continue that, but not the mandatory part where they get penalized.
Absolutely.
But I haven't heard those type of things lately. I mean, have we done additional outreach from that perspective?
Yeah, there's been quite a bit that's gone out just in a flurry, but Atine has much more to come as she prepares. She's done, I think, a lot of work on, don't correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of work on social media. So that's almost an ongoing, constant issue. We're working with our GTV folks to put together some of the pieces for that. I think we've had at least one press release that I know of. We'll prepare more of those. We've got bill inserts that are going to be going out. Every medium that we have the capability of using, we're going to use those to get the message out. So we kind of cranked that machine up. We were anticipating the announcement from the governor, but waited until it was released. And once that was done, Atine and her staff have begun to, as I said, crank up that PR machine, and it's going to go out. And it's going out now, and it'll just continue to increase.
Well, on that line of conservation questioning, what are the triggers to implement phase 2 and 3 and 4 and 5?
Well, as I said, MWD is a key for us, so we will watch them and then see how they proceed, and we'll be looking at our deliveries and our storage and our capabilities, and we'll watch the meteorologists and what they say. I think a lot of this is due to some massive front that has settled in the Pacific that is there and has been there for somewhere between 8 to 13 months. MWD has indicated that their water capabilities are good for 12 months at least. So they're very comfortable with where they're at for at least a year period. So we'll kind of continue to monitor that, continue to work with our other agencies. And as Atine said, nobody in this area, Northern California is a little bit different, but in this area has put in mandatory measures. But there is no one specific trigger. I'm sure if MWD tomorrow put in their mandatory, we would then follow that. We really don't have much of a choice in that particular case. But what would trigger us to do it, even if they didn't do that? Not sure, but we'll just keep an eye on things and see how our water delivery and local production goes.
Okay, so it sounds like MWD is the main trigger for us, but potentially we could, or the city council can act on their own, that the city may be in a dire situation, then they can implement their own phase 2. Okay.
Absolutely.
It's good to know. Any other comments? Additional comments I have was about the turf replacement. I mean, my understanding is the city doesn't have a turf program.
No, this would be the replacement of natural turf, grass.
Natural turf.
You tore your grass up and then replaced it with California native plantings, not artificial turf.
Okay, not artificial turf.
Then you would be eligible for the rebate, yes.
But that issue's going to come up again with the drought coming around. But that's not, because I remember a different report from the sustainability group on looking at that issue. I mean, I know the city council probably doesn't have an appetite to revisit that artificial turf issue, but are we going to try to continue to push that, even on the backyards rather than the front yard?
That's something that has been previously taken up by the planning department, but from where I'm sitting, I think the council spoke pretty loudly and clearly on that, and I don't think there's any plans to bring that back to them. I know they haven't asked for it, so I don't see that happening. I think this is the alternative to that. If you're concerned about your grass, is to go with these low water, low maintenance landscape planting alternatives that you mix in with hardscape rocks and those kind of things, and eliminate the grass that is one of the big, watering your lawn. That's a big deal. And as you mentioned, Mr. Yao, in our conservation ordinance, that's the key thing that you hit, the amount of time you can water your lawn, the days of the week you can water your lawn, and that's where you save a tremendous, the overspray when you water your lawn. Those are all big things. So if you can get an opportunity to replace your grass with beautiful native plantings and get some money back from MWD at the same time.
The last thing I have, maybe with Ms. Attorney can answer, potentially we're not in a mandatory phase, but I hear from the residents that they're very frustrated when they see a building or a home have a broken sprinkler and the water just gushing down the drain. What type of steps can they take to report that or mitigate that problem?
They can always report it anonymously through our website and through our customer service department. We do have a no waterways policy in effect at all times, and a leak has to be fixed within 72 hours. So if that is reported, then our customer service staff will send them information and a letter letting them know that they have to fix that issue. And as we do ramp up our conservation, if we do move into mandatory, then there are different ways that we address that, where we really start advertising the anonymous tip hotline, and we basically ask your neighbors to be vigilant and look at the community and report, unfortunately, if they see those things happening, and then we do follow up with that.
Yeah, I think that would be a wise move, even though we're not in the mandatory phase, but at least to mention those things, that if you see some water waste, then try to report it. Not to confront the owner or anything, but at least a contact information so they can know what to do. So that would be good to have. Any other things? Any questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Tunio. So next item, please.
5, oral communication.
I don't have any cards with me, so let's move on to the next.
6, agenda forecast.
Let's see, the next meeting will probably be in a regular scheduled meeting.
That's regular. Everything is ready. One thing I noticed that we'll have to put on there, Mr. Linz will add that, which is the report from our state lobbyists. So that will add to that. And Mr. Boyd, the Drawer Stream report will be ready? Okay, excellent. So we're good on that. Looks like we're good with the agenda that we have. April as well. April, I wanted to add one thing, which would be our strategic plan outline. We'll have that to bring to you to discuss in addition to the other items.
Question on March. So, in the you're planning on going to the City Council in mid-March with the new water cost of service analysis. Is that correct?
Yes.
We have that on our agenda for April. So if the timing works, it would be nice to see a preview either then or to my mind, it's an important enough matter that perhaps we could consider doing a special meeting. And if the regular meeting is not convenient to the development of that particular plan, perhaps we should think about a special meeting on that one.
And as I had promised you last time, we would definitely keep that in mind. We are right on schedule, and there'll be some critical days coming up, but my sense is it may slip a little. I don't know. We'll see, but I'll do everything I can to try to get it to you as soon as we can. If we can get it to you before, we will certainly do that. Special meeting is something you're willing to put forth, and we'll keep that in mind as well.
So just let me know. I mean, I think we can schedule that. We will check with Gloria and the availability of the room, and if it needs to be, then I'm sure staff will accommodate that request, so we'll have enough people around.
So we are just getting the cost of service analysis. In fact, we have a piece of it, but not all of it. So once we have it in our grasp, we'll be able to better judge how much work is left to do. Hopefully not a lot, but
yeah,
we'll see.
Very important. Okay, thank you.
And then May, obviously, is water rates and all water rates. We're dedicating that meeting to talking about really from the COSA study, the structure we're proposing, and any other changes to rates that are going to be proposed, and options as well, for you to make a recommendation that will then be taken to council.
Mr. Carmichael?
Thank you, sir. On the April meeting, so we have the KPI update. Would that be an appropriate time to then perhaps implement this new cover sheet?
Yeah, we'll try to get that for you for sure. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So should we reflect that on the forecast, just to certainly to remind myself that would be the KPI update with the...
If you'd like us, as a reminder, we won't forget. It'll just be part of what the KPI update is to the commission. Deviate a little bit from what we do with the council, but that we can certainly add that language so that it...
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. Thank you very much, sir.
You got it.
And then one other thing that was mentioned by Commissioner Hale was perhaps an opportunity to review the shovel-ready projects. I hear there are at least a number of them. The number
we could have,
a large
yeah.
number, a small number. But was that something that you would want to see as a list, and a prioritized list of shovel-ready projects?
Yeah, particularly in the context of the next meeting while we have our lobbyist here, because those are things that we might want to insert into the water bond.
Those are, and those would be specific to the water bond, or specific to the emergency legislation that we all hear is coming regarding water projects in the drought.
So if we can discuss that in the context of the legislative update, that would be fine. I don't know if we need to agendize that separately, but I defer to the city attorney on that.
Our general shovel-ready projects would be very similar to what you've already seen through what we have for our bonds. I was speaking more specifically to this emergency legislation. If it gets passed, we were told would be shovel-ready projects that are related to building an armored device around you for drought, being drought resistant, or being ready and prepared to better weather drought situations in the future. So, but we'll do both of those if you would like.
Are there any plans for those type of things, like increasing storage for the city or those things?
Our storage is, we're pretty comfortable with our storage, and now those are big projects, and we don't have anything in the what I would call shovel ready. I think more along the lines of what we would be looking at, what our focus would be if this emergency legislation comes forth, and I don't know, Mr. Hale, we've heard $1 billion was going to be set aside, would probably be purple pipe projects. That's where we'd look at, is to try to augment our recycled system, which we haven't had the luxury of having moving funds to. We haven't had funds for any capital projects, but now that we do, again, we focused a great deal of those on the potable water distribution system and some of our wells, obviously. But if this additional funding became available, I think our focus would probably be on that recycled system.
I think that'd be great, because we did some studies in the past on
Yes.
that, and so those are like high priority projects that we can implement right away rather than waiting 5 years.
Could be a great opportunity for us. We'll just have to, like I said, is that nuance of shovel ready. So I'll work with Mr. Abweg and see what we can have prepared.
I think that might be worth a separate item, maybe with it, because that takes a lot more detailed discussion than just the lobbyist presentation to roll under that. Can we?
Well, yeah, I think we can come right off the heels of that, but if this occurs, as we've been told it will, the lobbyists are going to give you the full-blown explanation of how it works and what's eligible, and then we can come right back on the heels of that and say, here's some projects that we have that we think are ready to go and that we would submit for that funding that's become available.
Okay. So we'll add that to the agenda item on March?
We'll put it for, we'll add the legislative or the legislative advocate update, and then we'll put something there, in maybe a subtitle of projects.
Yeah, and I think time is of the essence on these things, because the legislature is likely going to move very, very quickly on water bond issues if they're going to, in light of the drought situation and everything else. And a lot of cities in California are far more effective than Southern California cities, with my experience up there, at getting their asks in, getting them in early, getting them in quickly, and getting language in the bill to support themselves. So the faster that we can act on this, and the faster that we can sort of develop a consensus about what is a priority for GWP, the more we can give our lobbyists the ammunition they need to go and advocate to our legislators.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile to include that on the March agenda, just to look at the shovel-ready projects with some cost estimates on how much we can push out.
Do that.
Great.
Also have a sort of a general question for you, Mr. Zern, and your staff you have present. Is there anything else coming up in the near term, sort of on the level of the cost of service analysis that will be going to the City Council that we should consider adding to the agenda forecast, so that we have an opportunity to make sure we're doing our part?
And at this point in time, it really is, our focus is on the water rates. And we are spending a tremendous amount of time on that. That's the real big issue at this point. Following that, right off the top of my head, I can't think of anything, but obviously where we have the opportunity to get that to you up front and ahead of time, we will do that as a promise. But I think is so much effort and focus is on the water rates, and once we get through that, then we can start to look at maybe coming up. We have budget coming up, so that's one. So certainly we'll be getting that to you and presenting that to you ahead of council's adoption of the budget.
What is the timing for that?
The budget will probably be back to you. Usually, I think we came back to you May of last year. So I didn't put it down here because we're kind of waiting to see. It's a lot of big ifs there too. We're waiting to see what some of the costs that are coming in for retirement and benefits and how those are going to impact us. But I think May is probably a good month for us to make that presentation to you.
Okay. So yeah, the water rate presentation and discussion certainly will take a considerable amount of time from that agenda, but should we add that then as a second piece?
Well, let me see how this all plays out. I think that if in fact we have pretty good numbers and pretty good projections on our budget, we might be able to bring it to you in April.
Okay.
I think that's appropriate.
Should we just add, may I suggest then that we simply add it to April and then if needed push it to May?
Yeah, that's perfectly okay. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
We don't want to forget the fact that we're still going to be in a drought, and the drought emergency will continue to exist in the state. Should we put something on the agenda for the next few months just to prep the discussion or any updates that we may have? Because we can't really discuss it if it's not on the agenda, whether it be old business or not. So if we can agendize just that topic, and if anything comes up, or if there's any outreach that we should be doing or additional city council recommendation, then we have that opportunity to discuss it, because then it becomes an agendized item. Does this commission view that it's appropriate just to put it
fine
monthly until we pass this emergency as a monthly discussion on drought preparation and water conservation?
Yeah, I think drought updates would be a helpful thing to have. Just update on the state water supply.
Yeah,
you can do that.
So let's put that on pretty much every month for now until we agree to take it off. So we'll put drought preparation every month. Okay, anything else? Not. Let's move to the next item.
Adjournment, 7, adjournment.
Any motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
Second? Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.